Hello, everybody. This is Anuj Tripathi, and you are watching the Review Universe, aka TRU podcast. So today we are joined by Charlene Farrell, a counseling psychologist, educator, and the author of deeply moving book In the Eye of Grief. Celine works closely with children, adolescents, and adults supporting emotional well being and life skills. Her book was born not as a literary project but as the therapeutic journey written in the midst of the profound personal loss. In the Eye of Grief is a raw blend of narrative and poetry that captures what grief feels like when it hits, how it consumes you, and how slowly learns to walk alongside it. Today's conversation is about grief, healing, writing, and learning to live with loss. So, Celine, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Celine, for our listeners meeting you for the first time, how would you introduce yourself both as psychologist and as a writer?
All right. So, Charlene is my name. Charlene Farrell. I
So
live
sorry for
in
that.
in Goa. All right. Very, very the sunny shores of Goa is where I've been brought up, and I've lived here most of my life. Um, a voracious reader. I've been in the field of education since the year 2000 and 2010, and over the journey of my life, I've always loved to write, but somehow I found psychology as something that drew me in. So writing was just a hobby, and it was always something that I would go to when I was feeling low, or at the end of every day, journaling was what I would do. So I've got shelves over here just full of journals. And it was actually my father's idea for me to publish my poetry.
Okay.
And I always kept, dragging my feet. I didn't want to, and I was always scared to do it. But sadly, he passed away, and that again triggered my journey into journaling, and that's how I did it in honor of him. He didn't get to see what he always wanted me to do, but I did it in his honor.
Okay. So sorry for your loss, ma'am. Writing
Mhm.
is often described as a form of healing. So, at what point did you realize that writing was helping you to process your own grief?
I think right through. It's not only with grief, it's always helped me process my thoughts, my choices, my decision making. So when grief struck, and I never ever thought that I would lose him. He was only 74. So I never thought I would lose him so early. So when he actually passed away, I just did what I normally do to deal with my emotions. And it started off writing, as in I write pen and paper. That's how
Mhm.
my mode of dealing with stuff actually is. But this time, for some reason, I also started typing as I was going, and because the emotions were so intense and so many and so complex, it just continued, and I started learning because I started learning how I was being healed because I couldn't wait to get back to my laptop. I would go to work, do my normal thing, deal with life, because I also counsel. So in the evenings I deal with sessions. So I couldn't wait to get back to my laptop at the end of the day and just process every emotion that I was going through. And this was the book came out basically on the first anniversary of his death. So it was that first year that this book is about. So because I couldn't wait to get back to it, I realized that something inside me was transforming. So the grief was not healing; it was changing from day to day because I had this outlet.
Okay. So, in the eye of grief, began as a therapeutic process rather than a planned book. So, what made you
Yeah,
decide to turn something so personal into something to share with others?
I think, as I said, it was my dad's dream to see my work published. And I think the only way I thought best to honor him is by doing something he always wanted me to do. And as we were coming closer to the first year of his anniversary, I thought, what better way to honor his dream than to publish a book in his honor? So that's how it came forward. On his birthday, his first birthday, uh, as not here, is when I signed the publishing deal.
Okay. So, one like personal question: how did you deal the thoughts, the like the emotions which you have thought, like you have came when you are writing these books? So, how did you deal with them?
Um, the whole process actually was very, very long. It's still, I'm not done yet. I'm still going through the process of grief, because sometimes suddenly something will happen and then it kind of triggers a memory or a moment or some feeling. But emotions are something I've always had a lot of experience with. Being a therapist, working through people's emotions is what I do. That is part of my career. It is the chosen path that I have taken. But when it came to my own feelings, I didn't know where to go. So I turned to written word, which has always been a solace for me. So my emotions also were processed bit by bit.
Got it. Okay. Like book blends poetry and narrative. So, why did poetry feel like the right medium to express the grief when the regular language often falls short?
Yeah. So for me, it's always been uh, a very the form that I rested on. So growing up, whenever I did have an emotion that was difficult for me to process, and I didn't want people to know, what I was going through directly. So I took the indirect route. The beauty of rhythm and rhyme and those things are what always appealed to me. So poetry is not always what you read is what it is. There are always some hidden meanings. And I think that's how I held close also to my vulnerability. And I allowed myself to process my feelings, because there are certain poems in the book that say something but actually mean something more deep for me.
Okay. So, as a therapist as well, like, do you believe like reading books or writing books can help you like process your emotions way faster?
Yeah, and the reason why I'm smiling is because that's always something that all my clients, the moment I say, you know what, the first thing they say is, okay, there's a book that you want to suggest to me. So, yeah, actually, I strongly believe in exploring your own life through the lives of those who came before us. So, books are a medium that I feel so passionate about. Just a month ago, I overhauled my entire room because it was getting too cluttered with the amount of books. So I donated a lot of my books and I invested in a Kindle so that I could have more space for all the stuff that I wanted to devour. In the past 2 months, I have devoured around 11 books already. And it's again just the space where you can learn to identify with other people's emotions. And I think it's very personal, it's very private. And that's what I love about books and writing, because it remains very, very sacred. It's between you and the author. And I think I just love that thought that you're connecting with somebody who's never met you and you're processing because that person processed before you.
Okay. One thing which I thought multiple times, like it may be contradictory, that whoever who is not a book person or doesn't know how to read that much with proper focus, by of also controlling their emotions, how can they read these books? Like somebody who is not a book reader.
Okay. So, being a teacher also, I think a lot of it stems from how children are introduced to books. A lot of the time in our society, books are not given the importance that
Yeah.
they should be given. Like for instance, if you look at our national libraries, they are so unkempt. They are not well maintained. But then you'll have certain cities that are so passionate about their books and so passionate about their libraries, and their libraries are so beautifully kept. That in itself helps the child to understand. the beauty of it. And it goes beyond, like, over here, I think a lot of the time we treat books like a punishment. You have to read so many pages a day and then I'll give you a reward. But if we treat books as the reward itself, children start developing a passion in it. Like, that's what happened with me. I was not forced to read. Books were kept in the house as rewards. If you have time, you read. And that's how I picked it up in the first place. That's how I found my career, actually, by reading.
Okay.
So I found therapy and I found counseling and psychology through a book when I was around 14 years old. So
Okay,
I
that
think,
was interesting. So, like,
mm,
can you explain more than the?
so yeah. So as I said, I live in Goa,
Yeah.
and bookstores are now becoming very, very prevalent here. Earlier, they were not that much. And I was born actually in Bombay. So every summer break, I would go down to Bombay for, to meet my family. And it was basically going home. And every year I would go to town with my mom, because my mom is a voracious reader. And we would pick up like boxes of books, because I mean, in town you get books for like 200 bucks. So now it's 200 bucks,
Yeah.
but in that time, 25 rupees, 30 rupees, 40 rupees. So I just picked up a whole lot of books, and we came back home and I started going through all of them. And there was this book called Sybil. And I picked it up and I was like, okay, let's start reading. It was a book on, at that time, it is called multiple personality disorder, but now it's called dissociative personality. And I found it so intriguing that one individual's personality could split into 16 or 17 personalities. And that's kind of what ignited the spark in wanting to understand more about psychology. And so all these years later, here is where I am.
Got it. I'm somebody who is much more interested in the psychology, but I
Mm,
have never been able to complete a book because I have multiple thoughts coming in, and I
mm,
couldn't finish that. So,
mm,
is there something which somebody can do who is not that much book reader and
mm.
tries to read and understand something like this?
Yeah. So I think bringing your own personal flavor to a book is very important. So if you see the books that I donated, a lot of the time I had to be very careful with what I was donating, because in the columns of all the books, I had annotated everything. I had annotated, there were sticky notes, there were notepads. I've got books right now in my drawer that are full of, things that I've taken. And now that I've moved to Kindle, I can highlight and then go back
Got
to
it.
it. So I think that is what is important when you're reading. It's not about just reading to finish, it is reading to process and reading to adapt to your life. So I always tell my clients, I tell people who are getting into reading, that a self help book was written for the author, by the author, but you need to take it and make it your own.
That's a great line. Okay, so moving forward, are you a Kindle person now or a normal book person?
I was resisting Kindle. I resisted Kindle for all the years of my life. Like, I had a Kindle some time ago as well, and I was like, no, I can't. I mean, it doesn't give me the same feel as a book. But now, shockingly, I can't go anywhere without my Kindle. I went for a holiday recently, and the first thing I made sure was that my Kindle had enough charge for at least the duration of my holiday, and it had enough books for the duration of my holiday. So, and I that wouldn't have been possible if I was carrying around books. So, this small little device with all the books I wanted to read, and it made my holiday so much better.
Okay, so you perfectly become a proper Kindle person.
I think I have, but I still go back to the to the hard books for a lot of things, actually, especially as a teacher. I find myself researching from a solid book more than a soft copy.
Okay, moving on towards the book only. You describe
Mm,
grief as something like that completely involves a person. So, how would
mm.
you explain grief to someone who hasn't experienced a deep loss yet, like the teenage
Uh,
ones?
I would explain grief as something that keeps coming. As a therapist, we are taught the stages of grief and by Kubler-Ross, and we're spoken to about how to handle bereavement. And then it's only when you go through it that you realize that you never really finish grieving. I don't think it's something that ends. It doesn't have an end. It just keeps transforming. So I would suggest, or I would define grief as something that transforms as you go through life. So now I'm coming up to 1.5 year. I have finished 1.5 year of since I lost my dad. And I do know that what I was feeling last year comes still this year, but not in the same form. But the intensity is still there. It's
Got
very
it.
difficult to explain in words. But now I think I move more towards enjoying the moments that we spent. Last year, it was all about grieving the losses. And this year, it is all about reliving the memories.
Okay. As a psychologist, how do you see people commonly misunderstand grief, especially is how they expect themselves or others to move on?
I think in society, and I'm not talking only about Indian society, I'm talking about society at large. Grief is not something given due importance. Children are not taught how to handle people who are grieving. Adults are not given the tools to be comfortable in front of people who are grieving. So you'll notice, as somebody who is grieving, you'll always notice that people are uncomfortable to speak about your loss. And
Exactly.
I think that is very, very unfortunate because the griever only wants that. They only want to speak about their loss. So it's such a dichotomy because you have a griever who wants to speak about their loss, but you have the society that wants them to hurry up and move on. So I think a lot of people who are grieving are moving on because of others, because they don't want to make other people uncomfortable. And I think if we transform that idea and we try to understand that it is okay to deal with negative emotions, it's okay to be with negative emotions to help people process it. I think that would make grieving so much more easier to not deal with, but easier to live with.
Okay. Like, what do you think? Like, is forced move-ons are like kind of difficult for peoples, or they should like doesn't try these or something?
No, I think everybody wants you to move on. They'll say things like in my grief itself, I've heard people say this one line, "Oh yeah, I know how you're feeling." And another one that really upsets a griever is they wouldn't want to see you like this, you
Okay.
know. And the griever then will turn around and think, "How do you know? What do you know?" So in this year and a half, I know people who have also lost people, and the one thing I refrained from saying is, I know what you're feeling because everybody's grief is so different. You cannot know what somebody else is feeling, even if that person who is grieving the exact same loss as you. Because the relationship that you shared with your person is so very different and individual from a relationship that another person is going through. So I think society needs to stop forcing people to deal with their emotions and to get out of it faster. I think society needs to start healing together. It is one emotion, it is one feeling, it is one experience that everybody sadly will go through. But everybody just wants to see what happens on the other side. They don't
Understood.
want to go through the storm with you.
Okay. Okay. So exactly what do you suggest? Like, um, as a learner, I don't know what to say. So what do you
Hmm.
suggest in that situation?
I would suggest let the person speak about the person. And if you know the person who the griever has lost, speak about them, use their name. Um, don't say things like you'll get through this,
Sure.
or don't say things like, oh, it's been 5 years. it should have passed. It won't pass, right? Because even for a child who loses a family member or a parent, I know a lot of children who've lost their parents. And for them, grief is very different. And we can't say, don't cry. We can't say, don't feel. That is like telling a society, don't feel, don't emote, don't hurt. We are human beings and we are created that way. So it's okay. I would suggest people to be more present. If somebody is talking about their loved one, hear them out. If somebody is hurting because of grief, just be there. You don't have to add to the discussion. You don't have to say, "Oh, I know how you feel," or "I can't imagine how you feel," or explain to me. Actually, explain to me would be a nice thing to tell a person who's grieving. Like, for instance, if you don't know, ask. You
Yeah.
know. So I think that's why even towards the end of the book, that is a few of the pieces of advice that I have written down there.
Okay. I still like want to ask like how much they should like ask them. How much? Like, is there any limitation? Like now they should stop asking and just let's just say move on from this.
Never say move on. I would say never say move on. I would just say, just be there. Don't ask. If the person is not telling, or if there are some people who don't want to speak, just follow the lead of the person who is grieving. And that doesn't only go with grief, that goes with every emotion. If somebody doesn't want to talk about it, let them be. If somebody wants to talk about that, let them talk. If somebody wants to be silent in the room with you, let them be. I think we need to start normalizing comfort in negative emotions. Everybody wants to give advice. I think that is something we need to refrain from.
Okay. So, how did your professional understanding of emotions influence the way you processed and wrote about your own grief? Like you are already a professional.
Yeah. So I think because the vocabulary was there, I was able to put to words what the feeling was. But at times I still felt stuck. So I realized through this journey that no matter how professional or how many years you've been in a profession, even if it is very closely related to something like grief, I don't think you're ever ready. But it does give you a little bit of an edge to understand the vocabulary that you require to explain it. And in saying that, I would say it helped the other way around. Grief helped me to be more patient with emotions and understanding of emotions, not the other way around.
Okay. Since the book's release, have readers shared their own grief stories with you? Like after they read your book, how was the
Yes.
response that attracted you?
I think a lot of people came to me and said it was like reading what was in my mind, and of course, the first bit is very strongly a memoir, and then it goes into more about dealing with grief. And a lot of people came up to me and said that it's become like a tool that I use now because a lot of people are grieving, and it's a very niche group that have read the book. It is not just everybody. People who are not grieving don't really go seek a book on grief. So they've come to me and said that it has been like a friend. The book has been a friend. And I think that was what the whole idea about releasing it was in the first place. Because my dad was always somebody who wanted to do for others. So I think this kind of just pushed his nature a little bit more.
Okay. So, what advice would you give to someone who is currently in the earliest and most overwhelming phase of grief?
I would say let it consume you. Don't push yourself to heal. Allow the emotions to grip you. Find your tribe that hears you and keep the name of the person constantly on your lips.
Got it. Okay. So, about the book only, somebody who is just listening the name of the book for the first time. So how would you describe your book, like, to that reader?
So the reason why I chose the words in the eye of grief is because I processed grief like being in a storm. And this very well known line, in the eye of the storm. So the first year is like being in the eye of the storm, where everything is crashing down. Everything you know about yourself changes. And that is why I chose this name, In the Eye of Grief, In the Eye of the Storm, because grief is like a storm. And the first year is like being right in the center of it. As the storm settles, the damage becomes more evident. So in year two and in year three is when, you start actually feeling in your heart, okay, I'm never going to see this person again. When the storm is raging, you're afraid. Your emotions are all over the place, but you're not processing the pain. You're not processing the loss. You're not processing the hurt. And that is why I've called the book what I called it.
Got it. Like, you have just beautifully constructed this. Okay. So finally, if a reader picks up in the eye of grief, one of the hardest moments of your life, of their life, what is the one message you hope they take away?
I just hope they feel that this book is a companion for them. Because there's very little out there that, because I searched, Amazon turned into, my searches were only about books on grief. And I devoured a lot of books on grief. And every book told me, you will get through it, you will get to the next stage, the next stage. And I'm still waiting for the next stage. And I just hope when people pick up this book in the midst of grief, they realize that there doesn't have to be a next stage. They don't have to go to a next stage. They don't have to find a path to a next stage. They just need to be where they are, process where they are, allow the relationship that they've lost to become part of the memories that they keep and treasure and hold close.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. With this question, I'm concluding this podcast. And thank you so much for
Thank you.
giving us the time and discussing the about your book with us. So
Thank you, Anuj.
whoever is listening this podcast on Spotify or watching on YouTube, you can just go to the description. The book link is there. The social media link of Celine ma'am is there. You can just give your feedback and review on the book, and also take a look of the book. So thank you so much, ma'am. One message to
Thank
the
you.
audience you want to, like, convey.
I just want to say that in grief, you always have a hand to hold. Um, Hopefully, the book becomes that hand to hold. So
Thank you
yeah,
so much.
so get the book, and also if you want, I'm on Instagram. You can contact me, and we can speak about grief.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks so much for joining in.
Thank you, Anuj.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.